Last year, I finished writing a writing handbook called Good Rules for Good Writing. I gave it to my older brother to give to his agent, but I never heard anything else on it. It might be the kind of book I just have to hang on to until I'm have more of a name from my giant memoir I've been working on forever. After that's done, who wants writing advice from someone you haven't heard of their writing? That's not always true, but I've noticed one of the writing books people mention the most is On Writing by Stephen King. It helps if you've already got a reputation established. But for a long time, I just had a file of writing principles, things that helped me. And they were things like put like with like, where I was just always telling myself this, but then I'd sometimes forget it for a while. So I was like, I should write these all down. Writers are kind of always living a second life outside of themselves, looking at themselves a little bit. I'm sure even in those early days, I thought this could maybe be a book sometime. And eventually they did start to get polished, and I did start to get a vision for a book. And that's why at the beginning of this last summer, when I was kind of between things and in a pretty desperate place in some ways, post-marriage, transitioning between jobs, worried about squirrel all the time. Oh, squirrel, why do you rebel and make your family weep? What a lion. So, if you are a publisher or an agent or somebody or something, here's something I got ready to go. Would love to get this out in the world. Maybe I'll just give this to friends that are editors at a college press. They're editing and publishing my friend's memoir right now, so maybe I'll wait. But anyway, Good Rules for Good Writing. Now, so throughout here, this book, I have visuals. And in the first half of the book, the visuals are always on the left. And in the second half, they're always on the right. This was an original part of the conception of this work. As soon as I imagined these being little vignettes of advice filling just rectangles on the page with 2-inch margins, those are really wide margins. I think it still daunts non-readers or casual readers a little bit, but it shouldn't. But these images, I think, they kind of generally follow the themes of the book, and they're always outdoor. This first one has just this tiny little silhouetted all-black figure in a foggy day on the edge of a suburb. And at the end of the book, there's also a photo that has a small figure like that in it. And I feel like these parts symbolize going into the work and going out. And that the figure is the reader. Or maybe it's the writer, that the reader is following through the work. But I think it's more the reader. Then it starts with this sort of introduction. What is this book? Who is it for? How should it be used? And who even am I? And how dare I presume to tell you how to write? Okay, let's look at that what first. As you may have already figured out, Good Rules for Good Writing is a compact collection of concise instructional vignettes, with every vignette expounding on one writing rule or piece of advice that has really helped me in my writing, and with every vignette intended for the use of serious-minded, ever-aspiring writers at whatever stages of their art lives. Every piece of advice here is only about 200 words long, and the book has been formatted with many tone-setting visuals, in part to urge slower and more thoughtful reading. What sets this book apart from most writing books, I would say, is that it is not prescriptive. It doesn't usually say there's only one way to do things, and most of its pieces of advice have been written just one at a time, over years, just whenever I felt like it. Some of these rules, you may note, are soon followed by rules that are literally their opposites, as if all these rules aren't even rules at all, but signposts pointing off in intriguing directions. This is a really artfully, consciously laid out work, very symmetrical. It's in 2 halves. There's internal symmetry as well. The introduction continued. And who is this book for? Well, in a word, you. You, the writer, the sort of curious, autodidactic, always learning person who would even want to pick up a book titled Good Rules for Good Writing. Because that's not everyone. You're kind of unusual. You pay close attention. You evidently care about expressing yourself clearly and compellingly. You care about improving and evolving your modes of expression, and, in whatever ways, you want to bear lasting witness to an ever-changing world. Time, place, people, yourself. Most likely, if you're drawn to a book like this, you are not a dabbler or a hobbyist or won't remain one long. You're a serious writer, even if you're maybe yet to be published and only just now getting started. Or maybe you are as or more experienced at writing than me, and this may be just a nice little refresher for you. I know I sometimes get in that mode when I read writing books, like, I know this, but it has been years since I reminded myself about varying sentence lengths for a livelier read, or about using semicolons to balance out sentences and suggest parallels. Again, these rules have helped me, and I bet they can help you. No, seriously, who is this book for? What kinds of writers? I say it's for anyone who ever writes anything. Most principles here could work with most genres and forms, and many of the most inspiring writing books I have ever read were about visual art. Vincent van Gogh's Letters to Theo, Robert Henri's The Art Spirit, Kirsten Swenson's Irrational Judgments. So I'd say clear-eyed writers working in whatever modes and or genres can find useful, adaptable writing advice nearly anywhere, including here. More on all that with the rule. Ask yourself, how can I do that in writing? For the past 15 years, I have primarily been a nonfiction writer, so that may account for not too much discussion here of, say, characters or story arcs, but I do see writing nonfiction as very similar to how I see writing fiction. In both, it's like we're building with blocks, and we can arrange those blocks however we want. In a fictional work, these blocks representing details can be small and changed, a character's eye color, a date. Yet in nonfiction, these blocks are bigger, facts, data, and need to be maintained, while they can still be very creatively and meaningfully arranged. Introduction continued. Squirrel actually wrote this part for me as a ghostwriter. I often turn my writing over to the kitties. Don't tell. Anyway, how should this book be used? Dreaming of basic modern-day survival, I have at times imagined this book assigned as a supporting text for college, high school, and certain middle school writing classes. Lessons could be taught using these rules, and discussions and writing exercises could be inspired by them. I can easily imagine writers penciling notes in this book's wide margins and around its photos. The book has just as many pages of my photos as it does of my text. The two main text sections start and end with reiterating summary pages, and there is a reading list and an index near the end. I can see this book being given to serious or soon-to-be writers as a gift when going off to college, graduating something, or starting a job. Good rules for good writing for a good writer and a good grandchild. I could see a kindly older someone inscribing the book's title page. Aww. People now buy books like The Elements of Style for such writers and occasions. And I love that book, but it can get bossy and prescriptive for sure. Not this one. This one is all about you being you, but up to 11, obsessing in the service of great work. Finally, who even am I? And why should you take my advice? And what could I have to teach you? Well, I am an intense, obsessed, experienced writer who takes all this stuff very seriously, sometimes at the expense of the rest of my life. I consider being a writer a high calling, a privilege, a burden, a joy in who I am. Over more than 2 decades, I have written hundreds of published articles on history, place, folklore, culture, and news for a range of Southwest U.S. periodicals. I once sold an experimental horror screenplay to an indie movie studio. I wrote a local history book about a favorite high desert mountain range, still in print, after almost 19 years. I earned a master's degree in writing from the University of New Mexico. I've had a dozen essays and a prose poem published in quality literary journals, including Tin House, and had that Tin House essay praised by the London Review of Books and listed as notable in Best American Essays 2015. Mainly, though, since 2010, I have been steadily writing one epic major work, and that has taught me worlds. I write, I teach writing, I have a lot to say about writing, and here I'm saying it. Then we have some visuals, some pages of visuals. And these are the only visuals in the book, these sections, that don't have frames around them, suggesting immersion. I think Maurice Sendak, Where the Wild Things Are, how the pages grow to take up everything. Max enters into the jungle. But here I feel like it's, the reader moving through dense growth to get at something. And then we're getting there. We got through that part. So now from here on for a while, all the visuals have frames. It seemed to frustrate my older brother that the visuals weren't one-to-one matches with the advice. But this first section is actually a very different sort of section. This is kind of a secret table of contents. Yeah, maybe this is too artsy for some, but look how it perfectly fills that 2-inch margin space. Perfectly fills. You couldn't fit more in there. This page is all the titles of all the books, but it makes a new sort of text to just put all the, not titles, all the bolded advice, pieces of advice in the coming selections. So, but here they've formed something new and they're just all together. Put like with like, avoid the familiar, waste no words, when in doubt, shout it out, let your darlings live, let your elements echo, let every element develop, Collaborate with your subconscious. Think in infinite prisms. Collaborate with your past. End strong. Move toward compassion and away from judgment. Ask yourself, how can I do that in writing? Move toward specificity. Connect every part with every other part. Care about aesthetics. Care about euphonics. Care a little about audience. Move toward truth. Think in paragraphs. Collaborate with concept. Use parts to create a whole. Collaborate with your future. Remember, you can do this. Remember, everything is always in motion and connected to everything else. Read often and widely. Make everything do more than one thing. Learn to use punctuation. Stare the blank page down. Put something interesting everywhere. Study your craft. Study everything. Get obsessed. When in doubt, cut it out. Collaborate with reality. Remember setting. Polish, polish, polish. Punctuate concisely. Wait. Write for the future. Collaborate with technology. Move towards simplicity and away from clutter. Listen. I like that as like a poster. But so then here, now we get into the actual rules. And so that was all the titles of the rules for the first half of the book right there. We have an evocative image, suggesting communication, suggesting signals, searching for signals. You can also say that this puts like, with satellite dish with satellite dish. Square with square in that grid. Put like with like is such simple advice, but really understand and absorb it, and your writing will become cleaner, leaner, stronger, punchier, less redundant, more concise, sturdier, and more direct. Another one of my brother's comments was that I should take the bolded titles and make them take up a whole line, because it wasn't clear to him that they were even bolded. And I don't know, there might be something to that, but because they're so tightly written in the space, it will mean editing, cutting out another half sentence probably at least for each one. Anyway, if you have several elements in a sentence and the sentence refuses to cohere, try putting the most alike elements together and then make sure the new bigger parts are organized as effectively as possible for whatever it is you want to do. I almost always also find redundancy when I do this. Words and clauses just fall away. I think of this as defragging the hard drive of my writing, putting like files with like files and revealing what was only taking up space and can be deleted. And this works on word, sentence, paragraph, subject, and unknown other levels. If you're writing a book, it can work on a chapter level. If you're writing a script, it can work well on a scene level. And next time you're organizing or decorating a room, you may even notice it working with objects. There are also, of course, valid literary reasons for doling out information strategically and or slowly, but putting like with like can remove what's unneeded and better feature what remains. Squirrel, wouldn't you say that seems like a good rule for good writing? I don't know, I love this book, and I love the mood evoked by the photos. I think if I can get this published close to the way I want it, it'll be a really unique little work and a fave of the nerdy grad school English college kids. The kind you carry around and mark up. I've been grateful for a book like this. When I was in a chapter, and one of the many chapters I've had of really seeking out this kind of stuff that's exactly about the craft. Avoid the familiar. If you've seen it done before, just don't do it yourself, unless you're doing something new with it. Stimulate, provoke, delight, stimmy, intrigue, and outrage us, but don't bore us. This means avoid all cliché, overused descriptors, cliched phrases, styles, plots, sentence templates, joke templates, words too often used together, unexplored stereotypes, and even clichés unique to you. Things maybe only you know you do too much. But avoid also those phrases and ideas that might not yet be clichés, but that certainly aren't new. We should want our work to always be surprising, to be constantly delivering us to new, unexpected places. Give us variety in every part of your writing. So don't just describe things in ways others already have. And once you have a draft of a work, do as many revisions as needed to remove clichés, familiar language, and anything else unoriginal. This sort of thing is fine for an early draft, but try to get rid of it as soon as you can. Such language will still turn up in dialogue, sure, and can be used effectively to establish a voice. But I promise you, exchange the familiar for the original, and your writing will only improve. Waste no words. This is among the best writing advice I know. Don't be coy, frivolous, or breezy. Never fluff up or pad your prose. Say what you want to say, every sound, feeling, thought, but be concise. Even maximalists should be minimalists. You wouldn't hire an architect to build unnecessary columns and incur pointless expenses. Yet bad writers build us columns of pointless prose, charging all expenses to their readers. Your Honor, I rest my case. Favorite method of mine to make prose shine and waste no words is to work within precise word counts, saying this many words enter this many pages and no more. This method can be used during the process and then adapted or abandoned, or it can be used to structure symbolism and symmetry into the final work. Not only does working within precise word counts ensure that for every new word added, one has to be removed, but it makes a piece of work continually increase in both liveliness and poetic density. Whatever your methods, the best writers do all they can to make every word count. If something said with 3 words can be better said with 2, say it with 2. Work that prose, keep it tight. When in doubt, shout it out. This is what I tell myself when I suspect something subtle I'm trying to do in a piece is just not at all obvious enough to be noticed by most of my imagined readers. If you aren't at all sure how to communicate something, just say it. Be explicit. Describe what you're doing or what you want to say, allowing readers to more easily marvel at and appreciate the elegance, the fun, or the symbolism of whatever ideas you explore. In subsequent edits, you will most likely remove the most obvious stuff anyway, and I find as I read through my work, draft after draft, the never-ending draft, and as I make the text better suited to fit what I said so explicitly, my most explicit expressions are no longer needed and can be cut. Or why not? Leave them in. As modern audiences have often been exposed to complex narration in pop culture and can handle a little meta-narrative, story atop story. As a reader encountering such fourth-wall-breaking candor, I often feel an increased intimacy with the narrator and or author, and thinking of this phrase while writing, I see my work become more declarative, confident, bold, and personal, or mine. Yeah, I like that pop song. Say what you want to say. Not a bit. This is an alternate title for this book, but anyway, this is one I feel deeply. Let your darlings live is what I say. The total opposite of a very violent and tired old saw, I say, has long ago outlived its usefulness. Why even be a writer if not to have visions and then make those visions real? If there are aspects of your work that are special to you, you should fight for them. If early readers harangue you to cut the most personal aspects of your work, but you feel inside you that these aspects are actually worth preserving, even if you can't exactly say why, then keep it all. If I had listened to all my critics in my life, I would not have some of my very favorite things I have written, many of them since published. Or I would, but all those pieces would be far more conventional, tame, and unsurprising. I admit the opposite of this advice can be true, in cases, especially if whoever's saying it at you just means be a rigorous editor of your own work, even work you really love. I just think it's the wrong attitude for a writer, this cold-hearted, darling-slaying attitude. If I'm editing something out, it's because it's no longer right for whatever piece, so what I'm editing out is no longer a darling. And if somehow it still is, that's why I have an extras file. It's like you can hear this car. I love some of these photos so much. You ever find yourself a fan of your own work? We should be fans of our own work, right? Let your elements echo. A writing idea has been haunting me, a demanding idea, a questioning. What if every element in a piece of writing was, in a way, a motif, significant, worth thinking about, as an illuminating element of the much larger work, its significance heightened by additional mentions, implications, arrows to and from, and supporting details mentioned elsewhere in the text. A house with many supports sounds to me like a pretty strong house. Maybe we can just ask ourselves, what if every element had a sort of echo elsewhere in the work, creating untold connections, supports, and or alternative ways of thinking of a word or phrase? Even attempting the above can lead to literature, layered, provocative, showing every interconnected, meaningful word placed as intentionally as a cog in a watch. This may happen organically in a lengthy editing process, months in, maybe while putting like with like. And just thinking about those likes as every aspect of the work may remind you of every other aspect. If I ever use a word in a piece, particularly a strong noun or verb, it's intentional. If I use that same word more than once, I want my readers to notice and think. I think all the photos being outdoors and kind of unpeopled, it's a real vibe. Let every element develop. The best works of literature can be maybe endlessly reread, continually yielding new meanings and connections. So write to do that. If something is even mentioned, find out how it is in some way significant. And when writing, notice what your own conscious mind gives you. If you notice yourself repeating a word in whatever text, instead of automatically reaching for a thesaurus, try examining the word and its connection to the larger piece thematically, and maybe these connections can be emphasized, resulting in fortifying the whole text in the process. Just imagine a perfectly motif-dense work, every mention connected to at least one other aspect of the text, illuminating both forward and backward, and guaranteeing a huge wealth of possible aspects of the text, for a mind to alight on, extrapolate, and ponder. Any writer who has ever experienced a moment of realizing that this sort of density has been achieved in a text, with the prose turned almost prose poetry, with no words or even syllables being wasted, usually as the result of months and months of refinement and polishing, will know it for sure feels like a real leveling up. Collaborate with your subconscious. Even writing alone, you as a writer, as an artist, are always collaborating, inescapably so, pairing up with the glimmering protrusion of your unknown mind. And that may be a writer's main role, to relax and let the unconscious mind do at least half the work, providing ineffable images, intriguing phrases, evocative juxtapositions, and/or new directions. Your consciousness is so much vaster than just that bossy, surface-level inner voice. Countless quieter voices murmur endlessly in a ragged chorus in that louder voice's innermost ear. And some of these speak deep truths. Seek to consciously catch your unconscious self doing something wild or unplanned, glimpsing a glimmer, like including a scene you never thought you would, exploring a seemingly offhand phrase, developing a startling but apt metaphor. And when this happens, watch it, behold it, marvel, enjoy, try to understand, and then consciously develop those unconscious elements in a compelling way. I often write to discover my motifs and themes, unsure when I begin what they are exactly, but 99% certain they will be there for me to find. Another one I considered as a title. Think in infinite prisms. Think fractally. Think in endless levels. Maybe my favorite postmodern insight is that in our big shared story, the one story, the only story, the story of what is, the story of everything, there is no main character or one way of viewing reality. You are you, but also a universe of microscopic life and quantum activity. You are you, but also just your genes. You are you, but also an infinitesimal shred of near infinitely larger stories of Earth, life, carbon, time, and space. Your life is your life, but it contains and is in infinite patterns and repetitions. Many of my favorite books recognize this, making their characters exist in a world, making readers feel they could leave the story as if in a lucid dream, heading off in whatever direction. Writing nonfiction, I feel this approach especially strongly, considering nonfiction the ultimate mythology, comprising even all fiction and all art, as literally all of that was written or created by characters in the nonfiction literary universe. And give a world enough details, and readers will find their place within it, giving them an added level of connection to your story and to you. Book's kind of long. That was my old storage unit at night. Collaborate with your past. Every time we leave an unfinished piece of writing and then return to it, with each return we have somehow changed, while the work has not. And in this return we are collaborating artistically with our past and likely future selves. Approach this solitary collaboration consciously and your work will only benefit. Learn to write in small windows of time, in whatever environment, in whatever way you can. Every time you return to your work, you will bring to it a new perspective, another plane of an infinitely surfaced prism. Write whenever, wherever, and whenever. Feeling, however, in whatever state of being. Collaborate with all of you in the world and in private, alert and exhausted. This principle can work across days, weeks, months, years, decades, however long you're able to keep returning to a piece. Just like a great painter eventually creating a masterpiece through endless attention to a canvas, your endless attention to a piece and your collaboration with all those past selves will almost certainly eventually result in something far greater than any mere one of you could have made rushing along in a more limited amount of time. Squirrel really didn't want me to include that one in the book. Sorry, Squirrel. End strong. By this, I don't just mean end whatever you're writing with a strong image, idea, phrase, word, tonal shift, and or turn. I mean, try to end everything strong. Every chapter and every paragraph, every sentence and every clause, everything that ends. Try not to end even with anticlimactic, unaccented words and or syllables, if more robust words and syllables are available. The archaic writing rule to never end a sentence on a preposition is based in Latin, irrelevant to English, but many such weak endings are prepositions, those little directional words. So watch those. Ending on the visceral. The laugh, pop, shift, beat, button, sob, and or gasp is a mark of strong writing. Such endings propel readers forward to the next beginning, off across those wide white gulfs between words. Without such endings, we get sentences that peak early and then just stick around, dispensing more information. Avoiding such endings, we get tighter sentences, giving all we need to know in a compelling, intensifying way, culminating at last in the most notable, timely thing so far. I am writing this in quarantine, during a pandemic, thinking my beloved sick cat is going to die. Move toward compassion and away from judgment. Have you ever noticed that almost all of the best writing tries to grant all its characters dimensionality, attacks no one without just cause, cares deeply about justice, and treats its readers as the author's equals, all deserving of respect and or at least consideration? It really is true. Writing that grants all characters dimensionality says that not only will heroes have vices and villains have virtues, it says that free will may be an illusion, and maybe if we were every atom someone else, like exactly someone else, we would/could only do exactly what they do. Compassionate writing is nuanced writing. Writing that attacks no one without just cause, that seeks always to punch up, never to punch down, is writing informed by justice, and so writing fortified, righteous, authoritative writing. Writing that cares reliably about what's right says, hey, whatever happens next, you'll have a trustworthy, self-aware guide. Treat all your readers as fully deserving of your respect and consideration. Try never to condescend to them or overcomplicate things to look smart. Try your best not to waste readers' time. The tower symbolism seemed to weave itself throughout this batch of photos. Appropriate is in Tarot. It's symbolic of cataclysmic change, which is a sort of time that this book was written, and what being a committed artist is like. You're always changing if you're an artist. Ask yourself, how can I do that in writing? Whenever a cool something intrigues you, and it can be anything, ask yourself the above, or what's the literary equivalent of that? If you read an interview with an actor who acts with a unique method, if you hear a song or an album that does something new to you, if you find yourself admiring the structure of a flower or a building or the rules of a game or anything, if you find yourself moved by a painting or a conversation, try asking yourself this question. No matter how often you do or don't find perfect matches, you will undoubtedly develop interesting ideas of form, structure, and or whatever other elements of writing you direct this habit toward. I once asked myself this question of a sink full of dirty dishes and dishwater, and as I loaded the dishwasher, imagined an essay structure in which the entire essay felt soaking in a single word, time, a word to appear at the essay's start, end, and every 60 words, semi-subtly punctuating the text. The best part of regularly asking yourself this is that you won't be influenced by only the usual expected sources. You'll get ideas from everywhere. I really love this photo because to me it feels so in the tradition of aspen art of the New Mexico highlands, this amazing old book collecting dendroglyphs on the aspen trees of northern New Mexico. That simple style even seems like it. But it's like, here's a pull where that's continued. Move towards specificity. Search your text for vague words like maybe, perhaps, probably, about, and around, and see if you can remove them entirely with some more research. This will let your readers know that you have worked hard, know you have worked hard to get them the information they might want, and can be trusted as a guide through the work. In general, it appears true to me that good writing moves away from the vague and toward the specific. Specific writing is knowledgeable and confident. Vague writing gives readers very little wondering. Specific writing allows for more art in your art. I know there are exceptions to this. I've laughed to myself before to read a suddenly extremely specific brand name in an otherwise general text. But maybe that's because this rule wasn't being consistently applied. Maybe the trick is to be just specific enough, appropriate to whatever voice is narrating whatever piece of writing, but not more specific than is 100% necessary. Perhaps. That's probably just about it. Put voice first and then learn just how specific you should be. Of all the pieces to which I have ever applied this rule, I can say it has only strengthened around all. Oh, that is a little joke in there that I use all the words you're not supposed to in the last paragraph. That's an A+ writing nerd joke. Oh, here's a good one. Connect every part with every other part. The art of reading is, in part, the art of seeing connections within a text, as is the art of writing. I've heard writers describe writing with this principle as mind as letting their chapters or sections or subsections or their paragraphs or sentences or books in a series or whatever units of prose and or visuals talk with one another. Others call it building connective tissue. Others making your chapters or whatever units all aware of one another, sharing motifs and themes and references. Working on a book, I will at times intentionally make such connections. Anastomosis. I like all my chapters to acknowledge and or expand upon aspects of ideally many other chapters apiece. This way a text becomes an interconnected realm of associations, a textural place, a mythology with its readers frequently reminded, consciously or of other previous elements they now know. But mostly I've internalized this idea like a pilgrim's prayer, aligned it with my breathing, and I'm automatically almost always looking for strong connections to make. Connections like these can be solid architectonic supports, adding real structural integrity to our work. Anastomosis. Okay, tag yourself. This one's me. Don't forget the milk. Oh, I took that photo because I was like, well, that's a new form of advertising. On the gas hose. The image turned out cool. What's that in the reflection? Care about aesthetics. I love words as conveyors of information and idea, but also as typically two-dimensional physical objects. Like it or not, for all sighted readers at least, the aesthetic experience is a part of reading. We read books and are transported, and that journey moves as if through a tunnel, somehow carved and blasted directly through a human consciousness, a tunnel made of paper and ink, or plastic and pixels, of dark-laden marks on a plane. Personally, I find the many processes of writing much more pleasurable when all my pages are laid out cleanly in a simple font, appropriately spaced. I prefer a written work to be able to stand alone without visuals for my blind and visually impaired friends, but if visuals can add to a work, it is an option that tempts me. The big argument against it in the past was that it was cost prohibitive or technologically infeasible to easily print visuals, but now, with computers making such printing fairly simple, you very easily can. As a writer and reader, I say, please care about aesthetics. I hate it when a work has been poorly presented. Train your eye. Aesthetics blur with everything and help shape a work's feeling. Care about euphonics. Care also about how the work sounds, how it sounds in your head when read aloud and or in any specific more abstract way that matters to you. This advice concerns voice. Read our work aloud and silently. I think I probably meant read your work. That's probably a typo. Sigh. The endless war on typos. It just doesn't matter how much you've gone over a text. They are in there. Sometimes they appear anew. Convinced squirrel is waking up, turning on the computer and adding them late at night. Read your work aloud and silently. Reading silently, words echoing internally, mimetic nuclei floating in your consciousness, is a much different experience than reading aloud, booming, half-sharp, like the edge of a blunt weapon made of words. But you can never know how people will encounter your work. So just do what you can to strengthen it from all sides in whatever ways you can. Read your work aloud and read it silently. Read it in many varying forms. One of my favorite editing techniques I lifted from musicians. I read my work into a free app on my smartphone and then play it back while cleaning a room or what else, taking mental or literal notes. This can greatly increase editing time and help polish your prose to a pleasing smoothness dense with information and poetic connections. Me, I like to try to be lyrical and or voiced, flowing, smooth, concentrated, and or consistent. Read aloud, read silently, edit, read, and edit until it sounds right to you. I find these images haunting. But Mike, you took them, aren't you a massive ego beast? So, whatever. I should be proud of their work. Care a little about audience. Like conceptual artists I admire, we all have to admit we can't assume a shared basis of knowledge with our audiences. But is it really pandering to put any more of ourselves than is absolutely necessary into our work? What does necessary even mean anyway? Does that mean we can never write lyrically, expansively, or with ornament? These questions open my mind like a can of soda, and yet I have to answer no. No. I mean, maybe no art is necessary if only food, shelter, and survival matter. But art matters to me and to people like me who find life intolerable without it. In my case, the art mostly books, but also cinematic art, visual art, and music. All that helps all us bereft existential heroes, you included, contextualize, decontextualize, mythologize, demythologize, harrow, soothe, provoke, and get by. You really can't assume too much about your audience, but you can be fairly certain that people will read your work or very different from you, so give people a way in. Recognize the most universal aspects of what you're writing and then develop those. Present yourself and or your subjects in some complete way. That last part's really key, I think about that. Am I presenting this in a complete way? I had never heard of this topic or subject or opinion. Would I be able to understand this? I feel like I got something. This is we're about a fourth of the way through this, so I'm probably going to make this 4 videos then. Storage units again. This book came from a time of interim. Move toward truth. In a Venn diagram, this rule's circle overlaps with move toward specificities. When I'm listening to recordings of my prose again and again, or reading it silently, one thing I always listen for is untruth. Have I let anything wrong creep in? Anything I might get called out for online and or by experts? No matter how much time you fact Check. Additional fact-checking may/will come with publication. Readers will find things you missed or got wrong, and it feels bad every time. This may be inevitable. Edit as if it is not. Also, if you can publish your work or portions online or otherwise before putting it into a book, this allows you to make any needed corrections before the work's final form. This rule works for fiction and nonfiction, when world building and or establishing tone, believability, and feeling. And it feels great to find obscure mistakes, from typos to factual errors, and correct or clarify them. When I do this, I see the work fortify before my eyes. I see a roseate glow of good health tinge its wan complexion. After months of fevered rest, it sits up in bed. It gazes out a window. Spring, birdsong, light. Perhaps it dares hope. All right. Page count wise, we are 1/4 of the way through this work. And so this is going to be part 1 of 4. That's the plan anyway. This has been Good Rules for Good Writing, an unpublished writing book I put together, wrote, provided the visuals for. But it could be like a quick sale. Most of this I spent years working on. It was a file that was building, but last summer was when I was like, I gotta just finish this real quick, see if I can get it out there. But my brother, who's like, an accomplished author, didn't like the visual aspect of it, and I'm kind of attached to that. I don't think I have his enthusiasm. Still, he said he'd give it to his agent, so we'll see if anything ever comes from that. College press might be the way to go for this one, but I could see it building a fan base. I can also see if I just wait until the memoir is successful, the autobiography, are out there, I could see selling this pretty easily. Okay, to be continued. That memoir. Only half a chapter left. I will finish it this year. It's a chapter comprised of 7 interviews that I have to do. Dang it, still. Hi, Prisma. Prisma didn't get spayed until later in life, after she'd already had a litter of kittens. And so look at that beautiful adult panther face she has. Squirrel has a very cute face, but hers is more kittenish. Oh, pretty kids. What a cat. Remember how I was annoyed that my neighbors had a water just gushing off their roof? Well, they patched the pipe, but it's still just leaking directly from the thing. Eventually you gotta just walk on by. There's just always gonna be a stupid white vehicle in front of my house with this guy out there. Either a drug dealer or just, what? Why would you be idling and just hanging out in front of someone's apartment all the time? Look at some more nonfiction next. I'm not getting many comments lately. It's been a long time since I interacted with anybody. I hope it's not just all bots out there. That would be kind of hilarious. Making these videos for myself and some grad student cataloging YouTube videos 100 years from now. What's up, grad student? Maybe I'll make Good Rules for Good Writing like an Etsy book, like a zine type cardstock cover book. Sell it on there, or find some print on demand thing. I heard Barnes & Noble has free self-publishing. Maybe I could just knock it out that way, make it a channel thing. All right. Yeah, if anyone really wants to get into the writing stuff, I did review all these writing books in some earlier video. Those are always there to go back and find. Books about writing. What even is BookTube? What are these videos? People talking about books. Kind of funny. Almost done with another reread of The Secret Sharer. I'll talk about that soon. I'm a super fan of that story now. To quote one of Conrad's contemporaries, the story is large, contains multitudes. All right, peace out.